A picture paints 1,000 words, but only if you cite it correctly. This video will take you through the process of citing any visual source, whether it's an oil painting, a hastily drawn cartoon, or a dress by Jean-Paul Gaultier. The visual source that we're going to be using today is this 1851 etching by George Cruikshank. This particular etching is a unique object. Although it's a mass-produced etching, something that is printed over and over again in black and white, it exists as a hand-colored or hand-tinted version in the National Library of Australia's collections. As you can see, the original image is black ink on woven paper. And this is the image as it appeared in most locations. However, the instance of it that we have available to us, the one in Canberra, has been colored in. And this creates a unique piece of art, a unique image that we can discuss in our historical essays or articles. So what this citation will provide is not only information about the etching, the sort of original work from which this was derived, but also this unique instance of it. And that should give you all the information you need to create a citation for any material or visual source. When it comes time to create a citation for a material or visual source, most of the information you need will be obtained from the catalog record rather than the image itself. And this is fine because the catalog record usually contains very specific information about that particular instance of the object, whether it was mass-produced or a unique object in and of itself. So where do we begin? The footnote or the bibliography? When it comes to visual or material sources, there's actually a third option, the caption. When you want to include a visual or material source in your text, you can often include it as an inline image, and underneath that image you will include a caption. Now that caption information will follow the same basic style guidelines as our footnote. So that's what we're going to concentrate on here, the footnote or the caption text. If you do just mention the image, however, as opposed to including it in the document itself, you will need to have a standard footnote and bibliography entry. So let's begin with the footnote or caption citation. Like most of our bibliography and footnote entries, we begin with the author or the creator of the image. If I look at our catalog record here, however, we have two different creators, George Cruikshank and David Bogue. Now, how do I go about determining who is the actual creator of this work? Or were they working on different parts of the image at the same time? Well, if I go into a bit more detail in this catalog record, it actually explains that George Cruikshank is the creator or the artist behind the image, where David Bogue is the publisher of the image, the producer of the etching or the instances from which our object is derived. So I have to decide, am I citing the image as created by George Cruikshank, or am I citing the object as produced by David Bogue from an image by George Cruikshank? To give you the most complete citation possible, I'm going to create a citation for the object itself, and this will give you all the different details from which you can derive your own citation, even if you're only doing the image as opposed to the object. So for creator, I'm going to include both individuals, George Cruikshank and David Bogue. Now, because a footnote is like a sentence, I'm going to put these in normal name order for the English language. First name first, family name second. After the two creators, I put a comma, and now I move on to the title of the work. If we look at the image itself, it doesn't appear to have a title. It doesn't have any kind of indication that there is a specific 4 or 5 word title to give to this particular image or object. What it does have, however, is a caption. And if we look at the catalog record, the caption is what the catalogers at the National Library have chosen to use as the title. So we're going to follow suit. So how do we style the title? Well, there are general rules for how you do titles in Chicago citations. First, if it is a standalone work, as opposed to part of a greater whole, we usually put things into italics rather than speech marks. And if it is a printed item, as opposed to a manuscript item, we again use italics rather than plain Roman text. Now, this is technically a manuscript item. It is a unique copy of this particular etching, but because it is a work of art or a visual source of some sort, we always italicize the title, whether it is an individual work or something that is mass-produced. So we italicize by hitting Control-I, and then type out the title in headline or title capitalization. Probable effects of over-immigration or importing the fair sex from the savage islands in consequence of exporting all our own to Australia. And as you can see, I've tried to use capital letters on every non-preposition conjunction or article within this sentence, all of the so-called big words. At the end of this, we would normally put a comma, but there is a set of punctuation marks in the caption itself, so we're just going to use those rather than the comma, keeping them in italics. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exclamation points. Now, if we look at the catalog record, they've actually included another speech mark and full stop. And I think this might be just a cataloging error because there's nothing on the actual image to indicate that those punctuation marks should be there. So I'm going to leave them off for now and just continue on to the date of the object. So we move out of italics by hitting Control-I again, and now we look for the date in the catalog record. Now, if we look at this particular image of the catalog, we can see a couple of different dates. The first one here, 1792 to 1878, male publisher male, is referring, I think, to David Bogue. Whereas the date down here of 1986 is when it became part of the collection of the National Library. Neither of those dates are particularly helpful to us. We need the creation date. Now, in most catalogs, that creation date would be down here with the rest of the metadata. But because of the way the Trove website is laid out, you actually have to move to the top here, underneath the main title, and you see this, Artwork 1851, and that's the date we need for our citation. So we type that in, 1851, and add another comma to offset it from the next part of our record. Now what we need to include is the medium and the physical description of the object. This is what makes this citation format so robust. We can use it for something like a painting or an image, but we can also use it for any physical artifact. It's really just here that we describe what the object is in as much detail as possible. That information can be found in the catalog record down here under physical description. Now, under physical description, there are quite a lot of different pieces of information. It has that it is a print, that it was using an etching and roulette technique, that it was printed in black ink, and that it was from one steel plate. Now, it is a matter of subjective choice how much of this information you include, but I would suggest you include as much as possible in order to create an idea for your reader of what this object actually is. So we're going to include that third line, etching and roulette, and notice I've not capitalized this because it's the middle part of our footnote sentence. Printed in black ink from one steel plate. And I'm going to add a little bit of extra information here. This catalog record actually refers to several different instances of this image, most of which are just black and white. It does acknowledge that some of these are hand tinted, and that's the version that we are actually referring to. So I'm going to add that information in. Hand tinted. Once we have our physical description, we move on to the dimensions of the object. There are two good reasons to include the dimensions. First, it helps someone locating this object know exactly what they're looking for. If it's a 10-foot painting, they're not going to find it in a 10-centimeter box. The second point is for those who are reading your article or your essay to get a visual idea of what this object actually feels and looks like. If you have an image that takes up an entire page of your text, it doesn't give a good sense of whether that image is actually only 2 or 3 centimeters tall, or whether it is 10 or 15 feet tall. And having that sense of scale can really help understand the importance or the meaning of that object. If we look at the physical description in the catalog record, there are 3 different sizes given, one for the image, one for the plate mark, and one for the sheet of paper itself. And again, this is about subjective choice, how much you include. But remember, I decided I was going to talk about the object as a whole, as opposed to just the image. So at the very least, I should include the dimensions of the sheet. But for the sake of consistency, I'm going to include the entire set of information. Image 14.5 by 39.5, plate mark 15 by 4 times 39.5, sheet 18.8 by 46 centimeters. In terms of whether or not you put in centimeters or inches, it really is a matter of the consistency of your entire document. You don't want to be moving from inches to centimeters between different citations because you want your different footnotes to be comparable. But you do want to be accurate. So if you're not entirely confident about converting inches to centimeters, use whatever is in the catalog record. In this case, it's in centimeters, and that's what I would typically use to describe artwork or physical objects, so that's what I'm going to include. I've put centimeters after each individual section for the image, the plate mark, and the sheet, and we want to make this both conflated in the sense that there's lots of good information, but also concise, and there's not any extraneous information. Once we've included all of our dimensions, we add another comma and move on to the final part of the citation, which is the location information. Now there's two different things that I could put here. On the one hand, I could put the URL of the visual source because there is an actual image of this object on the library catalog. But that image is the black and white image, and that's not the one I'm actually referring to. So I want to refer to the physical object that I saw when I was in Canberra, and so I want to describe where I saw it. And that's the National Library of Australia, Canberra. So in this particular location, you would put either the URL of the image itself, the database, if the online database doesn't provide a good URL, or the archive where the object is located, provided you actually looked at that object in that location. Once you have all this information, you have a complete footnote or caption for your visual source. Now we're going to move on to the bibliography entry. Now, as I said before, if you are including this as a caption, you do not need to have a bibliography entry. However, if you are including it as a footnote, you do. So what information do you include? Well, the first thing we need to include are the creators' names. And like all bibliographies, we begin the first name only in reverse order. So family or surname first. Cruikshank, comma, George. Now at this point we would normally put a full stop because a bibliography entry is like a paragraph and the creator section is its own sentence. But we actually have two different authors here. So what we need to do is first offset the first author with a comma. Now that looks a little bit strange, like it's a list of Cruikshank and then George, but really that first comma is separating Cruikshank from George in reverse order, and the second comma is separating the first author from the second or third author. And that's just the way that it has to be formatted in a bibliography entry in Chicago style. Now because there's only one other author, we have an and, David Bogue. David's name doesn't need to go into reverse order because it's already further along into the sentence. It's not the part that we're using to quickly scan down the bibliography page. We put a full stop to end that creator sentence and move on to the title sentence. Now the title sentence is exactly the same way it is in the footnote. So in this one particular case, I'm going to allow you the cardinal sin of copying and pasting. Now, after we've included the title, we need to include the date once again, making sure we unitalicize 1851 and another full stop. Date gets its own sentence. The next sentence is the medium and dimensions section. Both of them together are a single sentence. So again, if you copy and paste the entire section, make sure you go back to the top and change that first E to a capital letter because it is the beginning of that medium or physical description sentence. We conclude that with a full stop, and then we finalize it with our URL, our database, or our archive location. And there we go. You have a complete footnote and bibliography entry for this visual or material source. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please consider hitting the like or subscribe button. That'll let me know this is the type of video you would like to see more of. And if you have any questions or suggestions for upcoming videos, go ahead and put those down in the comments below.